Hey everybody, welcome back to the Firefighters podcast. Today on the podcast, I'm talking to AJ Whitaker. AJ is a wellness and behavior change coach for the Firefighters charity. Now, the Firefighters charity is an incredible organisation who we have been privileged to share a few moments with. But one area we are yet to cover, and something we're going to go into in today's conversation, is not just how we access that help, but what happens when we do. First up is a massive shout out to our partner, William Wood Watches. Chances are you already know who William Wood Watches is, but if you haven't, you'll have seen them in GQ, The Times, Esquire, Forbes, The Telegraph, BBC, The Financial Times, Men's Health, upcycling firefighting equipment and utilising every single component that makes up the beautiful watches. They've won the Esquire Self-Made Entrepreneur of the Year. They were chosen by GQ Men's Health as the best men's watches to buy in 2020 and 2021. And they've donated over 50,000 to international firefighting charities. Now, there's so many ways to go on and find out more about William Wood Watches. Head over to williamwoodwatches.com. Check them out on their Instagram. Check them out on their Facebook. They've got a private group if you are a member, if you have purchased one of their watches. So jump on over, take a look, whether it's the Triumph, the Valiant, the Bronze, the Chivalrous. And they've even got the Tunnel to Towers 911 watches. Honestly, if you are a fan of the emergency services, if you're looking for that gift for someone, whether it's a new recruit, whether it's retiree, get over to williamwoodwatches.com and take a look. I promise you will not regret it. Our second partner of the podcast for today's episode is the incredible Hikes. Hikes footwear is made in Europe, and they are an innovative, high-tech, functional shoe manufacturer, and they meet the highest standards all over the world. They cater for the fire and rescue, the medical, workwear, police, military, forestry, streetwear, from our tactical frontline special forces operators to our firefighters boots on the ground. Hikes are keeping us safe in every single way. As part of their partnership with the podcast, they are giving away a pair of Hikes boots every single month. So after the podcast, be sure to jump over to our social media feeds, have a look for that post, get yourself on there. We have given away 3 pairs so far. We are doing it every single month, so get over there, check it out. There is no funny details to be had, so jump on over, check it out. Hikes UK, a fantastic partner of the podcast. The Firefighters charity exists to support the mental, physical and social needs of all serving and retired members of the UK fire family, ensuring that they've got access to the right support in the right way at the right time. And that statement is something we are exploring today. We know the right support is out there and we know it can be delivered in the right way, but what stops it from being delivered at the right time is sometimes the barriers that we ourselves put in place through a fear of what happens next, that fear of the unknown, the fear of what I will be asked or what is going to happen when I make that first call. So if you're sitting comfortably, let's buckle up for safety, and I will see you crazy cats on the other side.
Good morning.
AJ, good morning. How are you?
I'm not bad. You've made it in very good time.
I have. Well, I always want to try and lean on the side of just being respectful, as always, if I can. I always hate the thought. I was always taught that 5 minutes early is bang on time. So if in my mind, if I feel I can't guarantee that, I hate that feeling, because, you know, it's the irredeemable asset, isn't it, time? And I feel like people are so disrespectful sometimes now. And I would hate for you to feel that way. So wanted to give you a heads up.
Okay. You sound wonderful. I've had a very good weekend. I've been out running. The sun has shone.
Beautiful.
What more could I ask for?
Absolutely. I tell you what, I find running hard now. When I was a kid, I used to do a lot of running. Have you always been into running?
No, I enjoyed sport. I then snapped my Achilles tendon in 2003, and that probably took 3 years. I thought, I'll just do the Limpston Commando Challenge for a laugh.
Of course, as you do.
As you do. I really enjoy it. So then I thought I'd try running.
I used to really enjoy it, but I kind of fell in love more with, I suppose, full body fitness, and also then the sort of strength and conditioning. I got bitten by the gym bug. And then I kind of went down that rabbit hole and haven't managed to fully navigate back since. But I feel like I'm at a happy kind of place now. But I'm very much of that sort of eternal mindset now. I've got that kind of infinite thinking. If you know, what's the gentleman's name? Simon Sinek. He's got a book called The Finite versus the Infinite Game. And my really weird long-term goal now is to, you know, still be able to do what I'm doing in like 30 years. You know, I want to be 60 and still be fully functioning, because I used to have like such a short-term mindset, and I know we kind of go off on a bit of a tangent, but we'll get started soon. It's I used to want to be the fittest, the fastest, the strongest, there were so many metrics I was trying to hit, And I realized that the way I was going about it, because I used to take a lot of drugs and all sorts of stuff, just wasn't sustainable. And I was trying to aspire for something that was ultimately going to cost me a hell of a lot. And I kind of think now that the real winners, I always think in life now when I talk to clients and stuff like that, are the people that in 20 years' time haven't got diabetes, they haven't got a chronic debilitating injury through poor posture, they've not developed a mental health condition of some form. I think they're the biggest threats that we're facing now. Being fit and healthy means it stands for something very different to what I used to think it was. Because also I've known in the past very many sort of what you would look on the surface to appear like very fit and healthy people, but some of them have the biggest demons.
Yes. And I would say that going to the gym, and I do understand the whole weights thing, although not to that level. Partly because, and I took it up to stop getting injured, to improve my muscle mass, and a variety of other stuff.
Why though? Talk to me about that muscle mass one. Why?
Well, being a more mature woman, it is much more difficult to maintain your muscle mass. And when you talk about being nearly 60 and still being able to do it, 60 is very much on the horizon for me.
How exciting.
Just the other side of the door. So I want to make sure that actually 60 is 40.
Oh, absolutely. Totally possible.
Yeah. I want to be able to still lift my own body weight, because I know it's going to be harder to keep that muscle mass. But I still want to be able to lift my own body weight at 65.
Absolutely. Do you think there's an aspect there as well, though, about sustaining independence? Because some people say that, I can't, I'm not possible to do things that I used to be able to do in my 30s. I think people can absolutely do them, but I think the margins get smaller. When you can scribble outside of the lines a lot more when you're younger. Yeah. And I say that as a sort of life habits, life behaviors analogy. Yeah. You can still achieve all of those same things, but you can't, the margin gets smaller. Do you know what I mean? You have to be a lot more intentional about it. Like I spend 20 to 25 minutes stretching now at the beginning of every workout. I never stretched, up until I was like 20, I never stretched. And then even then it took a ruptured disc in my back. It literally was rehab work. I never did any prehab work. Do you know what I mean? I didn't do any preventative work. It was always, I've torn something. I've had a prolapsed disc, I've X, I've Y, I've Z. And then I've had to learn what I should have been doing in the first place, because the margins just get smaller. You can still be as capable, but you've got to really systematically go through the process to get yourself warmed up for it. Does that make sense? And I think I say that to more than just exercise. People talk about being effective and, being able to operate at levels. Yourself, people like you and Ruth and things like that truly inspire me, because the way you're able to operate in the way that you are now, not that you're glorifying the work till we're 150 and never sleep and all that sort of stuff. I don't see your lifestyles as one that have sacrificed happiness to be able to be as effective as you are, but you've become very intentional about your margins. Does that make am I describing that right? Yeah.
And what I would add is, to a certain extent now, I don't listen to people who tell me I can't do something. And that's more often in the gym than anywhere else. Partly because I've got so much grey hair that an assumption is made about my ability before I even go to an Olympic bar.
Yeah.
So for me, don't write me off because what I look like. Write me off when you see that I cannot lift a certain weight, because actually, give me a couple of rest days, I might be able to then get that extra few kilos off the floor.
Now, with some people and with a certain, with a great coach or anything like that, and again, I'm trying not to make it specific about something like that because I don't think it is. Do you think when people do that, and this is a closed question, which is what I'm terrible at, I need to stop asking closed questions.
Go on.
I feel like when people say things like that, for example, the podcast. So I've not written any great books. I've had 13 career years in the fire service, but I've not. I wasn't at 9/11. I've not rescued 50 babies from a building or anything like that. So when I speak to people on the podcast, or when I speak in front of people, I'll often get people saying to me, you won't be able to do that, or you can do that, or be careful, don't set yourself up to failure. I think what they're secretly saying, because a lot of people don't even know me. So for example, somebody may see you, going back to the gym analogy, going in there doing something, and they say, at your age, AJ, you won't be able to X, because I feel like that leaves the door open for them to step through when they confront that. For example, when they confront speaking in front of a group, they've left the door open for themselves to leave by validating their own fear in saying, you can't do that. What they're actually saying is, I think I wouldn't be able to do that in your situation. I don't think I would be able to, AJ, still do what you're doing at your age. Therefore, if I tell you it's impossible, likelihood is you won't try it. And that will get me off the hook. It will leave the door open for me not to try. Is that, do you see any of that? Because I feel like people like yourself are becoming so rare because you're not subscribing to that dogma.
I think I agree. I would also say that when, for example, I've seen people look at me in the gym doing a chin-up, I don't want bingo wings. So I'm going to work on my arms so I can actually wear a t-shirt, etc. But people will look at me and go, "Oh, that's a challenge. I don't like her because she can do it, and if she can do it, it means that actually I could do it if I tried, and I'm going to have to try."
And that's it. Your very presence, your very existence. Sometimes, and this is not an AJ thing. I mean, I think for a lot of people, they get vilified because their very presence, the choice they have made to live the way that they live, puts a very uncomfortable light into something I've wanted to place in the shadow. If I stand next to you, you are going to cast a shadow over the decision that I have made to not push myself. I read a great thing only a few days ago. I think it was of a picture, and there was somebody clinging onto the leg of somebody else, trying to hold them back because and I think the words that said with it was, people, sometimes even those closest to you, won't want you to grow because it will leave them behind when they've already abandoned themselves. Do you know what I mean? When they've already abandoned their own ambition, sometimes they've abandoned their own potential. And if you step forward where they chose not to, then even that feeling of abandonment is, especially for us, we're group animals, that can be really horrible.
And I do find that probably the older you get, and I've noticed this probably more in the last 5 years, because I've let my hair grow long, I don't have it dyed anymore, I can't be bothered. The older I have become, the more noticeable it is that people will look at me and almost not frightened, but there is that, oh God, if she's actually done that, that means that I might actually be able to do that, and I've got to look after my own health.
I want to challenge you there, because I want to focus on the hair thing just for a second, because there's lots of places we could have gone there, and we'll get onto our discussion in a minute. I just find you so interesting. I love going off on a tangent like this. But you said there, I don't dye my hair anymore because I can't be asked. Now, I don't think that's true. And what I mean by that is you've changed where something sits in your personal priorities. But you are a disciplined person. You have a great amount of willpower, determination. You have a great deal of focus. I don't buy the fact that it has been a decision that you couldn't be bothered. I personally feel, just having known you very briefly, that there must have been a conscious or subconscious decision about what it meant to be dyeing your hair. Not that there's anything wrong with dyeing hair. My wife dyes her hair, and that's wonderful, and it's a personal decision. I don't think it makes anybody a bad person. But why did it change there? Because I don't think you could, maybe it is that you can not be bothered. I don't want to place words in your mouth, but talk to me about that. Is that the case?
I think the can't be bothered is, I think, a societal media imposition that women of my age should have their hair cut shorter and should dye their hair. Okay. So in a sense, for me, I am who I am. I have had people say to me, "Oh, you're going to look like a witch soon. Have your hair cut."
A witch? Okay.
Oh, yeah. So to me, I am who I am. If it's a choice between spending half a morning and £100 in a hairdresser's, because I can't be bothered to do it at home. I really can't. I'd never get round to it.
No.
I'm much more interested in going out for a run and spending £100 on a new bit of sports kit, or saving up or having some extra sports massage than I'm having my hair dyed. So in a sense, it's a shift in the priorities. And to me, this is the best investment I can possibly make in staying out of a nursing home and having dementia.
Absolutely. Oh God, absolutely.
And when you talked about the long-term health conditions, being fit and healthy, being mobile, being active, working those muscles, working your headspace, being disciplined about only having alcohol at the weekend, only having chocolate every other day, having those discipline measures, making sure you train, that will give me a longer, healthier life and will give me life.
I love that. I love what you said there about exercising the mindset as well, because also you're not saying denial. Things like the emergency services, and it's something we're going to get onto because your wealth of knowledge and experience and the people, so I'm really interested in what we're going to talk about today and the lens that it gives you and how, if at all, it's changed your perspective on things. But it certainly has for me. My experiences in the emergency services have given me a different. I love, one of the best things about it is how humble it can make you and how it gives you such a great perspective on a regular basis. Because we say people are ungrateful and we say people are entitled and things like that. It's not really their fault. They live in an environment where they don't necessarily get exposure to some of the challenges people are facing. They get exposure on YouTube or on a video, but there's such a level of detachment there that it's not enough to move people anymore. And I wonder, and I want to ask you, what is it possible for people to get that level of perspective without having to go to the quote unquote front line? So, does everybody have to go and support people as a wellness and behavior change coach such as you do, or does everybody have to become a police officer, a firefighter? Do they have to go and donate time to charity in order to get? I mean, it's great if they choose to, but we alienate a lot of the population there, and it almost feels like people are doomed if they're not going to ever be in a position where they can get that humility, that humbleness. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. My dad was a veterinary surgeon, a bit like the All Creatures Great and Small era, a bit later.
Yeah.
And I was allowed to go with him as a child and watch him at work. And I think I learned so much from him because of the way he interacted with other people. I learned a massive amount about relationships, empathy, compassion, just observing who he was and the lessons he taught me, which I didn't realise at the time, have left a massive impression and an impact on me that have given me an extraordinary skill set and made me the person I am, along with a load of other experiences.
Of course.
So in a way, I would say if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable or to absorb the true, authentic, real experience or see the real experience behind this frontage, I'm not sure whether actually we need to walk into the burning building.
No.
Because you can still feel the heat when you're 100 yards away.
And we all do feel that heat as well, in a way of, like with the conversation we're going to get onto, we feel the heat when somebody is struggling from something. We feel that energy, negative, anxious or otherwise, that comes off somebody, but having access to the tools to be able to do something about it, you were probably subconsciously and indirectly given those tools through your life experiences. And then you also made some conscious decisions to pursue it. You've not landed where you are now. This has been, you've had to have some intention or desire to pursue this sort of sector to be where you are now. But something we're going to speak about today in terms of the work you do with the Firefighters Charity is about recognizing, appreciating, accessing tools and I suppose what happens when we do.
Yeah. And I think the other word that is quite often overused is someone saying, I understand. Because in a way, and this is about having the experience and not having the intense experience. And early days when I was training, it was a word that we used with our friends and in the group work and stuff that we did where we said, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Actually, how can I understand anybody else's view to that level, because I haven't got their life history, their experiences. I don't view world through their lens.
No.
However, we can walk with somebody, we can sit beside somebody and help them explain how it is for them. We can help them explain their understanding without judging them, and that can then help that process of, okay, I don't understand it fully, but I get it enough to feel that heat, without walking into your burning building. Does that make sense?
It does, and I love it. I had to resist myself from from agreeing with you all the way through. I have a really bad habit of doing that. It's one of my big development areas. Right. AJ Whitaker, welcome to the Firefighters Podcast. How you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you very much.
Now, you and I first met at the Emergency Services Show 2021. You were there with the team. For anybody that's unfamiliar with who you are and how you're part of some of the great work that the charity does, just give us a quick intro, please.
Thank you. I was lucky enough to start working with a firefighters charity about 5 years ago as one of their psych therapists down at their centre at Harkham House in Devon. And really intensive work, incredibly enjoyable, and met some truly amazing people from the fire and rescue service, from control room, firefighters, support staff, estates, the whole kit caboodle. Loved the work, learnt an awful lot, decided to take a bit of a time out, which was partly life circumstances, partly wanting to look after myself, gather myself and for review. And then I've come back as a wellness and behaviour change coach. Slightly different angle, because it's more about prevention and getting people to engage in actually looking after themselves, looking after their head health. So that's where I am now. And in a sense, this is my work home. I absolutely love the charity, love what we do, love the fire and rescue community. Yeah, I'm really privileged to work with this whole group.
It absolutely oozes out of you. I was lucky enough to meet yourself and obviously several of the members of the team at the Emergency Services Show. And I love what you said there about this preventative aspect, because as you said in perhaps your original role that you did with the charity and some of your past work, it has an air of, similar to the emergency services, I suppose, funnily enough, of reaction. We are presented with a challenge or a problem or a hurdle, or somebody is traveling through a bumpy and or rough period of their life, and we are called in for the theoretical rescue. But I've seen this a lot with the charity, that whilst they've done incredible work for many, many years, the strongest tools that they're able to give people are some of these preventative tools. Not because they don't want people knocking on the door for help, but they don't want to let people wander through the fog to the point where they arrive at the cliff and then have to call for help. They want to try and empower people with the right tools. Am I understanding that correctly from the charity's angle at the moment?
Yeah, and actually, if I can take that cliff word, in a way, what has been happening is people have got to a point where they're on that cliff edge, either physically or psychologically. And from my knowledge, certainly psychologically, then they may have a parachute. They don't know if it'll open. They don't know whether if they jump off the cliff, it's going to be 6 inches deep or down into the depths of a pit. And in a sense, what we would like people to do is actually have the tools say, oh, it's okay. I'm not sure about my parachute, but I know somebody who can check it out for me.
Love that. Absolutely.
Because in a way, historically, I've spoken to so many people who are in a really dark place. They've been terrified of making a call for help, a real fear and so much around that. Yet when they've made that first call, it's empowered them to have tools to open that parachute. They've known what the parachute looks like, it's going to work, and it's actually going to get them to the ground, hopefully safely.
Absolutely. And we sort of, when we've spoken before coming on today, that really is sort of being the focus of our conversation today, because we very quickly learned that there are so many complexities and everyone's story and their challenge that they're facing is so unique. But the one sort of correlating feature, the one thing that we could see so many people struggling with is that first step. So that's what we're talking about today. This is where, the difference between information and knowledge and stuff like that. We have been giving people all the information for so many years. And I say we in lots of ways of life, even health and fitness and psychological help and sort of stuff like that. And the Firefighters Charity has been wonderful about communicating how people can access that help. But we haven't been able to, and there's something I want us to talk about today, go into detail or at least explore the range of options and experiences that might happen when you do. Because the cliff some people, the cliff might think of as I'm jumping off by myself, but even if they are actually plugging, quote unquote, plugging into the system to engage in help, that comes with a lot of associated fears of what happens next. If I raise my hand and say I'm struggling, what does that mean? What is going to happen? Is my career over? Is my life over? What is that going to look like? So that's something we're focusing on today.
And in a funny sort of way, I would pick up on the P's, if you like. Proper planning prevents poor performance. If you are armed with information about the system and what might happen or what won't happen sometimes as much help as what might happen, but also armed with how you may feel dialing that number, or even before you dial that number, and what you might feel when someone actually on the other end picks it up and says, "Hi, how can I help you?" So some people,
put the phone
absolutely,
down. Freeze.
Yeah. Absolutely. And for some people, that phone then becomes like a hot brick where you approach it and you sort of don't want to touch it because your chest gets tight, your shoulders and your neck starts to get tight, you get backache, you can't breathe. And that's before you've even dialed the number because you don't know what's going to happen.
Well, so many times, and I remember you and a few members of the team, in fact, have said to me that so many of your first connections with the people that truly need the help, they're fully aware of it, but the connection often comes through a referral.
Yeah. And it's almost as though having somebody else put that referral through sort of opens the door a little bit. I remember a few phone calls, and I'm going to be absolutely careful about keeping everybody's anonymity
of course,
there and confidentiality there. But with a few phone calls, it will be somebody's mate or somebody's friend who will phone us and say, "I have got permission to speak to you. I've had a chat with my mate. They're not great. Can you call them? Can you tell us what we do just so that we can give them the heads up?" Yeah. Because in a way, what they're then doing is in a sense, not similar to this conversation, but hopefully people who are listening will go away with a bit more information so they feel they can pick up that phone.
Yeah.
But so, for example, if you're aware that your level of fear might increase on that first phone call, if you're aware that that anxiety level may then brick your mouth up and cause you to almost have a heart racing and not being able to breathe properly, the person, our team on the end of the phone know that might happen. So there's no rush.
I think as well,
you can take time.
The referral aspect of it is very useful and fantastic that people have that connection with people and they're able to develop a relationship of trust where they can do that referral with that person's permission. But my biggest concern, and the reason I wanted to have this conversation today, is because of all the people in the messy middle, as I would refer to it, that aren't either, so that if you've had a big physical injury, and as a result of your injury, i.e. you broke your leg, you are referred to the Firefi's charity because you broke your leg. And that's fantastic. And as part of the care that the charity will provide, there will be an aspect of a sort of wellness check-in, and we'll explore what breaking your leg means and how this makes you feel in terms of your independence and your ability to live life again, whether that be personally or professionally. But the messy middle is, for me, someone who may be off work for a period of time. Therefore, if they have progressively begun to struggle, nobody knows. Somebody's not with them on a daily basis, and they're the ones that are most unlikely to get a referral. They don't have an obvious physical challenge that is big enough to warrant them reaching out for help in their mind. But as a result of their isolation and as a result of their deteriorating wellness as a whole, as an individual, they're the ones, for me, they're unlikely to get a referral and they get lost. They fall through the gap. Yeah.
And I think this is one of the benefits of the charity is you don't need somebody else to make that connection. You can phone us and on our telephone or number or through the website and do it yourself. However, what I'm also very aware, and I've seen this more in the farm rescue community than in any other area I've worked. So I used to work in the NHS and it didn't happen so much there.
Yeah.
is you are an amazing group of people who will go the extra mile to help somebody else, and then another mile to help somebody else. But to help yourself,
How selfish.
to be honest,
It's horrible, isn't
it drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Because in a sense, if, and the fire and rescue service over time has become more about prevention, okay? And you have home visiting teams, and you have people who go out into the community and do preventative work with youngsters, with hoarders, with all these sorts of things. Yet for yourselves, frankly, you're pretty rubbish at looking after yourself.
Just the way we work, and I'm not going to talk about work time regulation, but all the studies that have gone into, sleep and shifts and food and hydration and decompression and talking. And we're not, fire service aren't alone. The police, crikey, are doing our feel for them and some of the challenges they face. But even though we're aware of these things, we haven't picked up the tools in our own personal life and said, well, maybe I shouldn't be working a full day of something else straight after a night shift that I've just gone to a traumatic incident. I always think of mums, and I'm going to single out, which maybe I shouldn't do, but or single parents. Let's say single parents, where they consistently try and pour from an empty cup. Anytime there's a dribble of value in there, they think it's so selfish to keep that value for themselves, so they give it away. Physically, financially, emotionally, they care for somebody else. They give their time to somebody else, and they leave themselves so vulnerable to the things that we're all vulnerable to. And then they almost feel like they're a failure or they're weaker because they've not been able to deal with these challenges. But nobody can deal with these challenges if we're trying to pour from an empty cup.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that it's very similar to that. None of us have been on an aircraft for a very long time. However, if you actually listen to the air stewards, I'm not sure of the correct terminology there, I don't want to offend anybody. If you listen to health and safety brief at the beginning, they say to parents, if you have a child with you, please put on your own oxygen mask first and then your child.
Absolutely.
And I would say that's almost a mirror image of what I would say to anybody who's listening to this. If you do not look after yourselves, whether that's psychologically or physically, and obviously my sort of headspace works in the psychological sense.
Yeah.
If you don't look after yourself, how can you look after anybody else? How can you keep good relationships?
Yeah.
How can you keep yourself physically fit, mentally fit, in work, keep the family okay, if you don't take a time out now and again to regroup, put your oxygen mask on, refill your cup, and do those things that keep you okay. And in a sense, if thinking about the charity and the preventative work, if you make a call, we've changed drastically in the last year how we work. We've got much more online stuff. We've got much more on the website. But if you take a little bit now, you might not need a whole heap of stuff later on.
Yeah. And I want to just turn that mirror on you as well, because you've done this yourself. And I know I'll give a similar example for myself, where you said you took some time away from the field. And I'm not going to be so rude as to ask the details of that. But, when you say taking the small action now to avoid the big action, what you do and what so many members of the charity do, and all of the sort of people that take these sorts of calls and deal with these things, is it's a lot to take on. It's a lot of mental gymnastics. When you join people in some of these conversations, you've got to, sometimes I imagine, and I don't want to get dark about it, but they have to walk you down into the valley to show you what they're dealing with, and then hopefully you both walk out together and discuss maybe some thoughts and feelings and approaches that they may want to consider. And then of course they don't have to, but you've also done that yourself. That could have been the difference between you taking some time away from the sector versus never doing it ever again, because you have to onboard a lot to do the work that you do. And I'm sure you couldn't do it if you didn't have that level of awareness where you're like, well, because if somebody said to you, well, how do you deal with it, AJ? Well, you don't constantly. You take time off, as we all should. Yeah.
And there's a few things I'll pick up on there is, if we're talking about knowledge, expertise, and so on, if my house was on fire, I'd want you to come and put my house out and look after whatever is left, whether that's roof, just make sure that the fire doesn't spread to the whole thing. In a way, from my experience and say the charity's experience, we have the tools, the knowledge and the experience when your house is on fire, whether that's your headspace, whether that's physically, we have the tools, the knowledge and experience to help you put that out.
Yeah.
And actually, if I'm talking about someone psychologically, your head may be burning, but we have the ability and the tools to help you manage that, see where the source of the ignition is, if that's the right terminology, and I hope it is, and help you work out actually how that's not going to happen again, or how you manage that so that we contain it.
Well, that makes perfect sense from our perspective as well, because I hate it when I go to like a barbecue and somebody makes that joke and they go, "Oh, it's okay, we've got a firefighter here." Firefighter's no use without the truck and the tools. If my house was burning down, I would ring 999. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't go about trying to put it all out myself because I haven't got the tools with me. And similar to people, they feel like if I admit I need help, like if a firefighter, that's the nightmare, isn't it? A firefighter getting a fire at home because they're like, God, I'll never live this down. The lads will never stop talking about it because I've had a fire at my own house, and there'd be that fear of embarrassment. In a similar and more serious way, reaching out for help when you have framed yourself, not necessarily personally, but as an industry, as a sector, we've framed ourselves as the people that fix problems. Surely we don't suffer with problems. We're the proverbial hero, and I include all emergency services in that and our armed personnel. Surely we don't struggle. We just shouldn't need to struggle. Surely we've got all the tools we need.
I have met some of the most courageous individuals, and I agree with you, Blue Light Services and the Army, etc., who their courage has been on the end. Oh, I get quite emotional for a moment here. Who on the end of the phone in that first call with me have been brave enough to say, and it's usually on the back of me saying, actually, I really do want to know how you are, how you really are. They've taken a breath, they've taken a moment, and it may be words along the lines of, actually, I'm not okay, and I have no clue what's going on. It has been so rewarding that people have felt that they've been able to say, I'm not okay. But it's also heartbreaking that they've waited so long in isolation on their own. They can be surrounded by a crew, surrounded by family. They've got this amazing facade, but inside there's a smouldering fire going on where this smoke of unwellness, however that describes itself for the individual, is filling their room, and at some point they can't breathe.
Yeah. As well, do we get? There's a certain amount of social conditioning, because you said, like, when you asked that question again, the social conditioning that we have sort of brought in under the mask of politeness, and this goes back generations of, "Morning, AJ, how are you?" And you say, "Yeah, I'm okay," and that's it. That was the first ping. You know what I mean? I just sort of threw a stone at the window, and it just pinged off, and you went, "Yeah, I'm great, high five." I served the ball over to you, and you served it back. But then it's sometimes, like you say, and it has to be such a deliberate thing in a safe environment, such as the role that you do, where people can ask that question, and it's the second or the third or the fourth or the 10th. I mean, some people say as well, when you think of sales, they always say about sales, it's between the 5th and the 7th interaction that you'll make a sale. And I'm not trying to frame what you do as sales, but there's a similar aspect that sometimes we've been so conditioned not to share if we're struggling, that it might not be the first, the second, the third, it might be the 5th time. And I'm sure you see it so many times, and I'm sure I'm treading all over some of the stuff I want us to talk about, but people can attend 1, 2, 3, 5 sessions and still not feel comfortable enough, and it can be quite far into some of the experiences that you have with people that you have that quote unquote breakthrough, or they're able to not open up the dam, because that perhaps sounds a bit dramatic, but at least
I think
up.
I think you're right. And actually, there's something that we term self-stigma, and I don't want to get into too much jargon, but we almost have an inbuilt barrier that protects ourselves from other people making judgments, from our own perception of failing.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've certainly experienced both at the charity and work previously in this particular field is the amount of self-criticism that goes on around, well, I'm a failure if I have to ask for help. I'm a lunatic. And there's a great Pink Floyd song that's got a line in, I think, the lunatics are on the grass. I mean, how many of us grew up with that, oh, they're going to come and take you away for the padded cell. Yeah. There's this thing of, will my job go down the tubes if I admit mentally I'm not okay?
And people say that as a joke so often. They're like, "Oh yeah, so and so won't be on the run much longer. Not all their dogs are barking, or the cheese has slipped off the cracker. They don't know the sixes from the sevens." And people say it as a joke, but it's a little bit like every time you wipe a shade of something over something, it still leaves a mark. Do you know what I mean? It still leaves a mark until people look at what you've said or look at the perception that they think is going to be the brush they're going to be tarnished with. And actually, it's no longer a joke. It's become part of your culture where if you say so-and-so's crazy, what does that mean? What does that mean? They're in asylum? Does that mean they're going to harm? Are they going to harm me? Are they going to harm themselves? And then we create a monster that stands at the doorway of people asking for that help.
And in a way, it's that phrase, it's okay not to be okay until you're not okay.
Yeah, and then what? Exactly, yeah. It's a lovely thing that rolls off the tongue, but it's kind of like we've only made half of the statement there.
Yeah. And I think you're right. And we started this with around tools of how to help and that first call. That there are some things now, and I'm just reminded now about you saying, we all like to be normal. What is normal? Can somebody please tell me? Because I haven't found it yet.
I must have missed the brief. What was that one? Because I think normal and or the same as everybody else. I think I've got a T-shirt that says they said I was different. Best compliment ever. Because we all are.
Yes.
That's the unique soup that makes up everything that we are. But normal, and I say this all the time when people aren't sure what normal should be. Like when we give them first aid at an incident, and you go, "Oh, how's the casualty?" "Oh yeah, they're fine." You go, "What's the pulse like?" Normal. People, unless they've are up to date with their training, they don't know what normal should be, and they're not sure when they should be asking for help. And I see this in the same way when something starts to go a little bit off, whether that's in the simple sense there of their physiological indicators, their signs and symptoms, or whether it's something subtle, but it's also visceral. You can tell when somebody is struggling, even if they don't articulate it.
And I find it fascinating seeing that in say somebody I've had in a session, and again, if you're talking about indicators or what is normal, what is fine, and there is that classic thing about folded arms is a barrier. Well, hang on a second, and I'm putting my hand up here so you can see it, but hang on a second. For me, someone's face muscles over time can take on a very slightly different feel and look, because if they're not okay, you might find that the mouth is downwards at the corners more often. You might find that the eye muscles around the laughter lines are a bit saggier because they're not laughing. You might find that the shoulders, and I don't know if anyone watches Strictly or dances, the shoulders creep up to be earrings rather than down at their normal level.
Yeah. Posture's
not so good. You might find that the normal decision making, for example, disappears out the window because the cognitions aren't firing on all cylinders.
No.
Sleep is poor. I don't know, again, I don't know if the same phrase is crying over spilt milk. It can be the smallest of things that the temper goes, the tears come, the frustration comes.
Because they're looking for an outlet for something that's underneath. And the thing that, mine are in the past is actually a small pressure release valve. So they take the pressure that's already existing within them and their anxiety and that pent up concern and use that. And that's why on the face of it, it can feel sporadic and, uncalled for, as we might term it.
Yes. Using your cup image, if you fill a cup and you keep filling the cup, you can have a dome on the top, and then it takes one more droplet, and you might have 10 droplets come over the lip of the cup. Yeah. And it can be a little bit like that. And I don't know if anyone will have seen the stress bucket type image that you can see.
Yeah.
If you can keep your cup, your bucket, from having that domed top, from having it overflowing, by doing something sooner, by making that call earlier, actually you need never get to that point. Or if you do get to it, you can have that realization of, whoa, hang on, I'm exhausted. I've got to do something about it. Even if it's a couple of sandwich nights on the trot where you go to bed at 7:30.
I love that.
I say that if you don't have family.
Yeah, I think we only get away with it. It's a bit like when we have my parents or someone has the children. And my mum goes, so what are you guys getting up to? I says, we'll have some meal together. We'll probably go to bed early.
Yeah.
And because what we quite like to do is also get up early. And we try and do it obviously with the children, but we'd like to get up early and do an us thing, and just get out on the horses or even just sit and just sit and be.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? We treat sleep like the enemy. And I can certainly remember in the 70s and 80s, where if you could do 24 hours, you were really hardcore. 36 was even better.
Yeah, absolutely. Sleep is the cousin of death. I'll sleep when I'm dead. And we glorified that the image of the corporate CEO that lived on caffeine and even bless her for all the great things she did. And it's not a political conversation, but Margaret Thatcher, survived on very little sleep and had supplements and support from people to enable her to. But alongside that, we can make the correlation that no sleep helps you achieve greatness.
Yeah.
And we go, oh, hang on a minute, we've made an accidental connection there. Yes, it's one mechanism of doing it, but it's not sustainable.
And the other thing I would add to that is the media representation of that power is that you don't sleep, you don't look after yourself because everyone else will do it for you. However, if we then look at things like long-term health, diabetes, long-term low mood and depression, if we then look at dementia, sleep is not a waste of time. And actually, if we're looking at an indicator for poor health, if your sleep starts to go slightly wonky, actually that might be saying to you, I've got something going on in my head or physiologically that's actually having an impact on my physical, psychological health. I need to do something about it. And I certainly know from my own experience, and it is part of the reason I took a bit of the time out, is that my sleep was beginning to be poorly affected. I just had to recalibrate what was going on. A little bit of self-disclosure, if you like. So a very good friend of mine said to me, she said, you're not going to want to hear this. Actually, you're a bit grumpy.
How good of them to tell you that? How good of them to tell you that?
Yeah, but to be honest, that's what I needed to hear, because we then sat down over a glass of wine, although there are non-alcoholic beverages that you can consume and should.
Of course.
And we had a heartfelt discussion about actually there was so much going on that to prevent and to do something early doors, however risky it was, because actually it was a great risk because I wouldn't know if I'd ever get back to the charity.
Yeah.
It was a really, really, really tough decision. But for my long-term health, and actually if I don't talk the talk and walk the walk, I'm a fraud.
Yeah. That's one of the things that really helps me. When I get the opportunity to call myself a hypocrite, it's very useful. And this isn't about beating yourself up, but you can then force yourself to stop. You can allow yourself the perception that you're not being the best version of yourself. And even if, your impact is lessened. It can be narrower but deeper, if you're able to deliver value to those people that you're with in that moment in time. Whereas if you try and spread it off too thin, we find ourselves putting plasters over gunshot wounds.
Yeah, and actually, there's a phrase or a word, resilience, that's been bandied about in the last year quite a lot, or maybe even a bit longer than that. But in a way, admitting to myself that vulnerability, that hang on, I need to take a moment here.
Yeah.
Was my resilience down? Was I unable to be resilient? A lot of self-searching about that self-stigma, that self-critique. But in a way, I look back at that choice and I feel that it was jumping off the cliff with a parachute. I didn't know how long the fall was. However, I knew that with my parachute, I did have a good social network. My physical and psychological health were important. If I didn't walk the walk as well as talk the talk, I was a fraud. I wasn't authentic. And I couldn't live with myself with that. And I was learning so much about myself and also about the barriers to making that first telephone call, to making that first engagement with seeking help. That it opened a window of understanding for me.
So from that understanding then, let's get into the detail on that. When people have made that first call, how are they supposed to actually communicate what they're feeling? Because that, A, they may never have wanted to tell anybody in the past, and B, even when, like you said about the bricks in the mouth analogy earlier, is there a jargon? Do people have to need a special dictionary do they have to get the terminology right? Because so often if you're somebody close to you and you say, well, what's wrong? They can't tell you. They might struggle to find the words. So how do people communicate it in that first call?
I would say if someone was going to make that call, don't worry about jargon. Don't worry about a dictionary. Use your own frame of reference. Now, with a fire and rescue community, and again, if I refer to a charity, because I love it, and this also relates to most blue light services, use something that you find easy. And actually, a lot of people are doers, and they're problem solvers. They're not feeling. So pick something that floats your boat. And I remember one person who actually was doing quite a lot of the cooking and really enjoyed cooking. It was coming up to Christmas. So I said, pick something that's in your life currently to try and explain what's going on. So they picked a Christmas cake.
Love it.
And they said, okay, well, I have this list of ingredients that normally happen in my life. However, at the moment, I'm missing the spices, I'm missing the raising agent, and all the fruit had sunk to the bottom. And that was enough to get us started.
Yeah.
I had a chap who was a cyclist, and I have to admit I've learned a lot about cycling in the last few years. And I said, okay, try and use a bike. If you were sat on the bike and the bike represented your headspace, for example, how would you use that to explain to me what was going on for you? And they said, well, look, my gear shifter's not quite working. The chain's not quite on the derailleur at the back. And the group set's missing a few teeth.
So they're still they're still in motion, but it's jarring.
Yeah.
I'm putting in more effort to be alive. It's hard. I'm struggling. I am making progress, and on the outside it looks like I'm still moving, but it's hard, and I can feel there's something not meshing. Am I hearing that right?
Yes, you absolutely. So what we then do is we, using our knowledge and skills, start to wrap some language around that to help you make sense of it.
Okay.
What we've also said to some people who at that point have gone, oh, I'm not too sure about that. We've then said, okay, have a look at the website, look at some of those stories, have a look at some of the narratives that are on there, some of the articles. And if you really do want to wrap language around it, it's a bit jargon orientated. Share that. If there's a story there that's similar, let's use that. However, what I would say is, again, coming back to prevention, make the call early. even if it ends up being one call and you get enough from that one call and you don't want to pursue it, that's okay. Because next time you come to make that telephone call, you'll be a bit further along that path. And I think one of the things with articulating feelings, and again, I'm going to come back to a Pink Floyd song. There's a Pink Floyd song which I think is called Keeping Talking. And there's some really interesting language in there around people who cannot articulate feelings, thoughts. Don't worry, because at the end of the day, your experience is unique. If you make the call, somebody else will help you wrap jargon around it, will wrap language around it. I don't want to know the water pressure in a pump or a hose.
Yeah.
I don't need to. I want you to show up and save my burning building.
Yeah. And also, you don't have to know how things work to be able to benefit from them. I always use electricity as a nice example. Very few of us, including myself, fully understand how electricity is created. We have a rough idea, but that doesn't stop me walking to the room and just flicking the switch and benefiting from the help. Like you say, you don't need to know all the jargon. You don't need to be able to articulate it perfectly to pick up the phone and flick the proverbial switch.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, if I may use a running analogy, the London Marathon a few years ago now, there was an image and a clip of a runner in a dark kit who'd obviously slightly mispaced his marathon and was coming down the mile. He was all over the shop. And a guy in a green and white hooped vest supported him down the mile.
I've seen that. I've seen that photo.
Inspirational.
I know.
The guy who had mistimed his energy, if we talk about your psychological, physical well-being, he needed help. The other runner who helped him didn't actually need to know what was wrong with him. He just helped him.
Yeah.
And in essence, I actually find that image completely inspirational because it is it's so identifiable to how we are as people when we talk about being in isolation.
Yeah.
We are running through our own life, but now and again we need some help.
And also, though, we're stepping into uncharted territory a lot of the time. And I wanted to ask as well, I know it's not something we spoke about before we came on, but you know, when we think about different levels, different ranks, different structures, and if we echo back to that running analogy, if this person who's doing the marathon is a CrossFit world champion or they're a powerlifting world champion or whatever, they may have created an image of themselves that I have already reached a very high level of physical discipline, that when they step into something that they're unfamiliar with, it's a very different discipline, running. You know, and this is where I see different people at different levels in the emergency services, different ranks, thinking that I should have my, stuff together by now. I shouldn't have to struggle. I am a whatever. I am a group manager. I am a chief fire officer. I am a head of police. I'm an inspector. I shouldn't be struggling with this. But when you step into something like this, it's nothing to do with your competence. It doesn't make you a bad firefighter. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you incapable. It doesn't make you incompetent. You're stepping into a field that is new to all of us, and we all need to. The best thing for us to do would be to reach out for a guide. Yes,
and I would quote back something I've heard a lot in the blue light services. Every day is a school day. Now, for some reason, it's okay to say that to each other in the working environment when you are, I don't know, reviewing protocols, processes, doing a drill, learning from that. But somehow it's not okay when you need to have a learning about your own headspace. And I find it fascinating that we are so, I'm not sure if indoctrinated is quite the right word, but it's a failure to have a learning school day about your headspace.
No.
And again, I almost come back to this, how am I going to articulate it? What am I going to be asked about? In a sense, if you have a drill night, there is a protocol that you follow, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
about the drill, and then you assess what's going on. And you learn and reflect from that. As a charity, as therapists, we have a similar set of service delivery models. We have a similar set of protocols. We will go through with you the person who has made contact. And actually, this is a bit greater than that. Therapists in general have a knowledge and a skill base that they have a set of ethical, professional standards to meet. We have a level of training that we have to have gone through both a theoretical and a practical aspect so that we are clinically sound to do our job. So in a sense, when we're asking you how you're feeling or what you're seeking from therapy, or if you've been in therapy before, for example, we're going to help you work out how this therapy is going to proceed. So in a sense, first ports of call are sort of like making a protocol, making a contract, so that you're aware, or the person who's making the call is aware of what to expect, of how it's going to proceed, of you being able to take control of how the sessions or what sort of intervention happens. I have had sessions in the past where someone has spoken for only about 10 minutes in an hour's session.
Okay.
But that 10 minutes was really valuable for them. I've had somebody else who could not stop talking for over an hour and a half because they had started and they had so much they wanted to say that they couldn't get it all out, and the brain was really going really fast and the mouth couldn't keep up. It's up to you, and we are there to help. So in a way, if we're talking about how to articulate what are you going to be asked?
Yeah, what would you get asked in a session like that? Do you have to give your whole life story? Is that, you said there, for example, you know, the value of only sharing that little bit. Some people might think, I'm going to have to tell you about all of my life, and you might blame it on my childhood experiences, or, you know, what am I going to be asked?
I'm laughing a bit about the childhood experiences because that's really...
people have those themes, don't they? They're like, oh yeah, a psychiatrist's going to lie me down on the sofa and tell me it's my parents' fault. Well, I know it's not that because X, Y, Z. And but that's some people's perceptions.
Yeah. I have to say that I have never, either as a client or as a therapist, asked somebody to lie on a sofa, partly because they might fall asleep. And we've got important work to do. Because if they're that challenged, their sleep is probably completely shot, and an hour's kit might be very helpful. However, what might they be asked? You might be asked some basics around how long has this been going on. Now, again, to be fair, that's like smoke filling a room, or how long is a piece of string. Yeah. You might not know. So saying something like a while is absolutely fine. You might also be asked things like, you know, just describe your current situation, how that is different to how you would like it to be.
Yeah. Because people, in order for people to feel like something's not right, they must have some form of comparison. They don't have to be able to perfectly articulate it, but just the sheer acknowledgement that something is wrong means that you must have, at some level, be comparing it to a time or a condition where you believed yourself to be the other side of the coin. Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is find out what your normal is. So we can then work out what the not normal is. It's also around, if we're talking about what you may be asked, there will also be things that we need to tell you. So we would probably introduce ourselves without giving any personal information, because it's not about us, it's about you.
Okay.
We would give you some sort of time frame of, we might have 6 sessions, we might have 3 sessions. It might be an online platform. It may be face-to-face. Certainly with the charity, we're doing a lot more stuff online because we find it's easier for people to access in this bonkers world we're in.
Yeah.
There will be things around, we'll explain a little bit about the paperwork that we have to complete professionally. We would explain a little
That might
bit
worry
about
people.
confidentiality?
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you there, because that one there, that word confidentiality, we're at a place now where trust sometimes can become a scarce thing, and what we thought to be confidential almost becomes confidential with some conditions. Like, how does that work? Will you tell my line manager, even if it's not something, I don't know, it's not a scale, but if it's not something drastic, will I have to tell my partner? Will you tell my family? Will you be contacted? What does confidentiality mean in a circumstance like this?
There are different levels, and I'm going to take on a serious voice, because for us as a charity and for me as a therapist, confidentiality is absolutely key. And what you mentioned about trust, you must trust me in order to be able to share with me. Now, you're right, there are some caveats, and those are clinical and professional around things like safeguarding for children, especially.
Okay.
For all of us who work in the blue light services, we're aware of some safeguarding policies and procedures, and I won't go into depth on here because that's a whole nother arena. So we're all guided by that. Terrorism will be another one, and there are a few others which you should be informed of, which are generic to all therapists. There will then be specific ones for our charity. Now, the Firefighters charity, you are the person who's engaged with us. Our relationship is with you. So our confidentiality is to you. We will not share information with your family unless you expressly ask us to do so and we have written permission to do so.
Okay.
We will not share information with work unless you expressly ask us to do so and we have written permission. We have actually robust policies around confidentiality. So, for example, in my old role, I had a level of user access and confidentiality that suited that role. In my current role, I cannot access, and neither should I be able to access, any of that old work that I did. So the confidentiality of all those sessions stays with that role. Now, when you talk about trust and work and trust and management, we don't share. You, the individual, are the person our confidentiality sits with. And to be honest, and this is now my own wording, so I might get shot down in flames. Oops, that's not very, sorry. But actually, I'm not bothered whether you're a chief, whether you're a chef, whether you're a firefighter, whether you work in estates, whether you're part-time, full-time, retained, on call. You, the individual, are the person that we have the relationship with. You are important to me. Your individual story is important to me. My responsibility and confidentiality lies with you. To me, this level of trust is absolutely paramount. With the charity, you are the person we are in relationship with. You are the person we are engaged with for your life. So we are with you for that whole journey. So if we don't build that trust with you from day one, how are you going to trust us when you are 70, 80, and are still part of our charity family, our charity community? And I know I'm sounding very serious, but you can tell how important it is for me as a therapist, as a coach, as an employee, as a beneficiary of the charity, how key that trust and that confidentiality is.
It's everything, isn't it? And I think, especially now, like what we've said before about how rare it is, for many people it's probably quite hard for them to accept that, which is perhaps why sometimes things come out as a trickle, and things aren't as forthcoming straight away, because it's probably like coming across an oasis in a desert for a lot of people. They probably haven't been able to have somebody sit and sincerely listen to them without their own sort of agenda, if you will, or their own commitments as an employer. I just need to get you back on the run. I just need to get you healthy. This is just part of a process for me to get your value back in what we're doing, because at the minute you are a burden. To have somebody that's listening to them and who they can trust without those ramifications.
And I would say with and I love that oasis picture. In a way, what we're then saying is this is a confidential safe space in this oasis, but also we're going to help you to navigate your way around this oasis so that you can then move on and continue. If we are then an oasis for you a little bit further down across the next section of the desert, you will then be able to engage with that oasis quicker because you've already built the trust.
Mm.
And the other thing I would say is you are as empowered to ask questions around the confidentiality at every step. This is a two-way process.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I find with being a therapist, apart from if someone asks my job title and they think I can read them like a book and they walk away, which makes you socially isolated, is in a way we're perceived as an expert. And some of the questions you're asking me, in a sense, is perceiving me as the person in the know.
Mm.
You are the expert on your life.
Yeah.
I have some expertise that can draw out what the tricky bit is at the minute.
Mm.
But let's have an even sharing of power around this. So if you've got a question, ask me. If you've got a question of the charity and what we can do, ask us, because we're more than willing to answer that question. And actually, if you then have a subsequent one, that's fine too.
I love that. I wanted to talk to you about time periods as well. You mentioned in an earlier question, I think, about how long things might take, length of sessions, short, long, number of sessions, things like that. But we live in this world of sort of quick fixes and instant gratification with, and I'm not saying that medication doesn't work, but often people with a physical ailment might be given a medical, surgical, pharmaceutical pill or potion. This can sometimes be a knee-jerk solution, but if the process is different to that, then how long can therapy take? How long can this support take, and sort of what happens if it doesn't work?
Okay, I'm going to do the last one first. What happens if it doesn't work?
And is there even a way to say that it doesn't work? Because it's a bit like fitness. Well, again, if you go to the gym once, you're not gonna see a difference.
And you're right, actually. I think that's part of my hesitation, is even being willing to make a call and to make a telephone call, something has already shifted. Even having that first conversation, something will have already shifted. So in a way, it's already working. But it depends on what you individually mean by how it's going to work, and also what outcome you're expecting. So if I use the fire image again, if you turn up to my house and it's on fire, I'm expecting you to put my house out. That's my outcome. However, for yourselves, if, for example, and I'm going to try and use something here, but I might be completely off-piste and everyone can laugh at me.
Go for it.
If you've got a building with a thatch, with dried out timbers in the roof, cob walls which have got a straw muck content with really old beams, you might have somebody who says, well, put that out, but I want to keep the walls and I need to keep most of the framework because it's a semi-listed building.
Yeah.
That's not an outcome you're going to achieve because, centuries old wood is going to be chip dry. If the thatch hasn't been replaced in the last 20 years, it's going to be really dry. Cob walls have a different mixture to, say, brick. No hope. So
also,
what is your
if the building burnt down and we came away from it, it doesn't mean that firefighting isn't a solution for a house on fire. It just means
exactly
under those circumstances, a different approach is perhaps going to be necessary. And also, if you're at a different stage in your life, I suppose, and I'm just sort of from my own feelings now, I've made adaptations in my habits and behaviors that didn't mean I could then ever revert back to who I thought I was before, perhaps, because I'm at a different stage of my life. I'm a dad now. I'm not working the places I used to work. I'm not around the people I used to be around. I now have different obligations and different factors and different priorities in my life. So I am different. Therefore, what the outcome may be for me, and it certainly has been with things I've faced in the past with addiction and stuff like that, that I need to create a new habit or a new relationship or a new way of dealing with something, or even a new mechanism. You know, I need to, like when you were a kid, you probably didn't brush your teeth every day. Didn't mean all your teeth fell out. You just got away with it for a certain period of time. But as you get a little bit older and you realize you're not going to get these teeth again, you started brushing your teeth again. And you'd be no point saying, how do I get back to the time when I only have to brush my teeth once a week? Never. You know,
and I
come up with a new habit.
Yeah. And I would come back to the question of what if it doesn't work? In a way, what are you expecting from this for it to have worked? What outcome you're expecting? What is your aim? And you're absolutely right. As we go through life and experience different things, what outcome we want will be different. So in a sense, if your outcome from your training is to achieve a 1 or 2% increase, say, in your deadlift, because you're at a certain level of fitness, that may be different to when you first started doing deadlifts, for example. So if I have someone who comes to the charity, say, for example, who has a relationship issue at work, their outcome might be to be able to communicate effectively with that person so that the relationship improves. So that might be their outcome. We might have someone come with a difficulty with relationships at work who might want to navigate their way to a different department. Or they might find that it's spilling over into home relationships. So how do they put barriers in place between work and home? So depending on what your outcome depends on whether it's worked or not. You might also find that actually partway through, you've realised that actually that wasn't the problem. It was your parents after all.
Maybe. And it's taken until now for us to get to that moment, because I think when we're young, none of us know who we are. And as we start to realise from our own sort of nature nurture, as we gravitate and change into the people that we are then to become, we had no idea who they were when we first started out. I think of that when I think of marriage as well with my partner, that it has to be a continuing journey of self-discovery, because when we both got married to each other, I would say that we didn't know who we were.
Yeah.
And as I changed and as she changed, I always think of it like elastic band. You know, if I step left and you step right, we can step so far that it might snap. And if it does, it might hurt, but it doesn't mean that it was wrong. It might just mean that as we found out who we were, we just grew apart. And we're not to vilify that, but the aspect of constant self-discovery and constant self-awareness, which I hear so much in the words that you've used today, is that there isn't a quote-unquote finish, like you said about how will I know if it's worked. Well, there isn't an end. We spoke right at the beginning of our conversation about the old finite versus the infinite game.
Yeah.
There isn't a finish. There isn't a destiny. And that's not to say you will be in therapy forever. I certainly benefited from it for a period of time. And then I came up with my own habits of gratitude and reflection and just being aware. It's a little bit like I can't be around certain environments because I know I have an addictive personality. So it's not like I can develop an infallible strength that means I can do all these things and not become addicted to them. I know I would struggle. And I probably wouldn't be able to do that anymore. So I won't put myself in that situation. And like you said there, if it's a relationship at work, or it's a scenario or a situation that is not going to be sustainable, or if the cost of continuing with it is too great to bear, then the self-awareness to say this isn't for me anymore, and perhaps I need a change, is healthy.
I would also come back, and I'm very aware as you and I are talking about this, that actually we've both at some point started this journey of awareness, of authenticity. For somebody who has never picked up that phone before, knowing that maybe the first 3 to 4 sessions, maybe the first half a dozen one-to-one sessions may be tough enough. is a good enough knowledge to start with. Because what I wouldn't want to do is to put anybody off from thinking, this is going to take the rest of my life. It's too huge. I don't want to pick up the phone in the first place.
No.
So in a sense, certainly if we're talking about normal length of sessions, the NHS, certainly when I was working, it might have changed since then, and certainly in the last 18 months or so, the wait used to be quite a while. But in a sense, the standard is 6 to 8 sessions of an hour each with outcome measures, etc., as you go through.
Yeah.
So in a way, that is a rough framework to aim for. However, once you are informed, once you are able to look at information, that may or may not increase or decrease. I have had people who have come for therapeutic sessions who have got a preventative mentality, who actually 1 or 2 sessions is enough.
Yeah. Because
they just need to work this stuff out. In a sense, it's like improving your back squat technique. You might have been doing it one particular way for quite a while. You've learnt that, but you realise that as you up the weight, you need to alter your technique. So in a sense, psychologically, wellness as well, you've been following a format. You just need to understand how to tweak it to get a bit better.
Yeah. And if you're not married to the process, if you're married to the outcome, i.e. you want to live a happier, life with greater balance and less, because you're obviously still alive at the moment, hence why they're there accessing help.
Yeah.
But it's a rough old ride. And if you're less precious, or to use the idea of married to the process, then there's no pride attached to saying or feeling like you've been doing it wrong. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You've been doing it wrong. Well, no, here's an approach, here's a process, here's an adaptation, here's a tweak, which will allow you to continue doing what you're doing. And like you say, that's where the 1 or 2 sessions may very well be the case.
And if I can actually just backtrack a minute, because I think this is also something quite important from our viewpoint, from my viewpoint. Accessing therapy, accessing counselling, accessing services covers all ages. I've known people who are in their 80s who have accessed support for the first time, and it has given them a happier life, a greater understanding. They've been able to live the rest of their lives more fully. So there is it's not ageist, it's completely inclusive, and it is never too late to pick up the phone and give it a go. Never too late.
I don't want people to feel like I'm not bad enough to ask for help. Do you know what I mean? Do you know when people think like, oh, well, I'm not trying to kill myself, so I'm just actually struggling a little bit. I feel like what our intention of the conversation was empowering people to be able to access the help. And I think, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it, that encapsulates people in the darkest of shadows and also who are only slightly in the shade, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think I'm picking up from the way we're talking with each other and what we were saying at the beginning, that actually this is about trying to get somebody to pick up the phone and do something preventative. Give them the tools to at least put the parachute on and have a look.
Yeah.
And I think we've covered the bases with that. Suicide and suicidal ideation, and I think the confidentiality with work and putting on this great front so nobody can see, I think is almost another conversation.
Yes.
Because that takes it to a slightly deeper place where we would need to have, or I would want to have a caveat beginning and end with some detailed information, as if you are struggling with this, please, and give them some links. Certainly with self-harm, it's one of those things that everyone starts to whisper very quietly. Yeah. But actually, self-harm covers a multitude of stuff, from overeating, over-exercising. So let's put this out there. If one person identifies with it, if 10 people identify with it, if 100 people identify with it, or with somebody they know, we've succeeded.
People feel like they want to reach out, or they feel like they need to refer people in, and perhaps for some terrible reason they are not completely familiar with how to access the charity, because the fire service is a big place, and your guys and girls get out there. So I'll ask you how people can get in contact with them.
The first instance I would say is look at our website. There's a form to fill out on the website, so have a look at that. Have a look at the stories, the information on there. We are pretty good at getting back really quickly to somebody. There's also the helpline number on there. If you feel picking the phone up is too tough right now, or you're too busy, engage with the website, engage with the people on it, have a look, and just start thinking about making that call.
I love it. AJ, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy, busy life to be here with us today. It is a Monday morning as we speak, and I know Mondays, some people dread them and some people have a lot of priorities, so I love, and I'm not even surprised, because I'm obviously getting more and more aware of the charity's work, that this has made it into your diary as something important, and my hope is that people have taken a lot of value. I know I have, just from my own self-awareness, thinking about some of the things you've discussed today, so thank you for that, and I really look forward to hopefully doing some more work with you in the future, because I think there's so many aspects we didn't cover today that I think people can draw a lot of benefit from.
Yeah, and it has been my absolute pleasure. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about what we do. And if we can reach out or connect with somebody to help themselves, then actually we've achieved a huge amount.
Thank you so much for that. I'll speak to you soon.
All right.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, just dropping back in to say thanks so much for coming back to the Firefighters podcast. What a great chat that was with AJ today. As we alluded to there, all of the ways in which you can benefit from the work of the Firefighters charity are in the notes below. So once again, remember that the charity exists to support the mental, physical and social needs of all serving and retired members of the UK fire family. That fire family means it's not just operational personnel, it's all of our support roles and their families, most crucially. All of this is easy to access. Just head on over to the firefighterscharity.org.uk. There you can learn more about exactly how to access this help. And maybe even if today's episode has offered you a bridge to communicating this to somebody else. Maybe there's somebody that you feel needs this help. Maybe there's somebody that would have benefited from speaking to AJ themselves today. And of course, in saying that, I acknowledge that AJ is part of a much wider team of an incredible group of individuals who are both qualified and skilled, but more than that, have a strong, visceral drive to truly add value and support to the people in our fire family. So use this episode, share it with somebody, share it with a team, share it with the line manager, share it with the recruit, share it with the backroom staff, with the control operator. Anybody you feel could either benefit from it or knows somebody that could, then please do encourage them. And if this tool helps, then we have achieved the objective for today. Thanks once again for coming back to the Firefighters podcast. I hope you took value from it. I really appreciate your time today, and I cannot wait to see you back again joining us for another episode. But until then, stay happy, stay healthy, stay hungry, and I will see you again real soon right here on the Firefighters podcast.